THQ. While their name is mostly attached to all kinds of licensed games from the GameCube era, they have stepped out of their comfort zone every once in a while to fund original creations. From 2003 to 2005, THQ partnered with Nickelodeon to publish Avalanche Software's Tak and the Power of Juju trilogy. And they also published Destroy All Humans by Pandemic Studios. But perhaps their riskiest venture was publishing a high-budget action-adventure title known as Darksiders, developed by Vigil Games, a developer that was founded from pure passion for making games. Darksiders was their very first game as a studio, and it seemed unlikely that their game would even be published in the first place. Every developer they met with at that one lonely E3 when attempting to pitch the game turned it down. Except for THQ. Vigil almost didn't go to that meeting, and they were already running late, and yet, here we are 8 years later with an acclaimed pair of games and a third one coming soon. So let's discuss this series in detail and analyze just what made it so special. I'm Liam Triforce, and this is my Darksiders Retrospective. Naturally, let's begin with the game that started it all. I always really liked the title screen for Darksiders, which establishes the look and feel of the game. For those who don't know, the art direction in Darksiders was the result of Joe Madureira, a hugely influential comic book artist. His essence has breathed life into every aspect of this game. From the character designs to the locations you visit throughout the game, the world of Darksiders is enriched in detail, as if the game itself jumped straight out of one of his comics. It's especially memorable. War himself has such a distinct character design. He looks like the physical embodiment of destruction and power, which is obviously fitting. This is a trend that would continue with each Darksiders game, creating the physical embodiment of each of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And Vigil also made sure to breathe life into each characterization. War has a zero fucks given attitude, which is further solidified by Liam O'Brien's performance. I don't think it holds a candle to his unsettling performance as Gaara in Naruto. But he suits War quite well. It helps that a lot of the characters' dialogue is quotable.
Because if you offer Satyr Rider, perhaps we can strike a deal.
You won't like my terms.
You disappoint me, horseman. You look quite small from up here.
You can look me in the eye when I kill you.
In terms of the world around you, it looks much better than your typical apocalyptic game. The ruined look of Earth as the armies of heaven and hell battle, as well as the otherworldly influences, make the game aesthetically appealing. Sometimes the game will take you into parts that have been significantly devastated by the apocalypse, and places where demons and monsters have called home. I absolutely adore the way the Ashlands look, because it doesn't feel like a typical desert level. It's got the fortified areas that demons have taken residence in, and the boss of the level following you throughout. The Twilight Cathedral calls on those gothic horror vibes, and the setting for that final fight at the top is fantastic too. It's also interesting to see dilapidated, cobweb-coated areas in the Iron Canopy, as you make your way towards the Queen of the Spiders, Silitha. In short, Darksiders is a very stylistically beautiful game, with more life breathed into it than one might expect. The remaster of this game, the War Master, god that's such a bad pun, makes Darksiders look like it could have been released yesterday. The improved lighting engine, higher quality textures and assets, crisp shadows, and a smooth 60 frames per second at all times make it the definitive way to play the game. The neat thing about the remaster is you actually get it for free when you buy the original game on Steam. That was how I initially decided to revisit Darksiders back in 2016. The game was sitting in my Steam library, and one day THQ Nordic posted a community update on the Darksiders Steam page. Suddenly, I owned the remaster, and my save files were automatically transferred over when I installed it. I'd like to thank THQ Nordic for being one of the most consumer-friendly publishers I've ever seen. Right down to partnering with Nickelodeon to re-release some licensed games people held fondness for growing up. That's dedication. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's see what makes Darksiders tick. The plot of Darksiders is inspired by stories from the Christian Bible, but Vigil Games put their own heavy metal or dark fantasy spin on it. I admire it most because no one is a clear-cut good guy. Ideally, you'd want to side with Heaven, but the truth is they did some shady shit before the events of the game in order to prematurely bring about the final war between Heaven and Hell to decide the fate of humanity. But Hell was prepared for the conspiracy and fought back. War answered the call during the apocalypse and took the blame for bringing about the end of humanity. No one in this story is a clear-cut good guy, and the only person that you can identify with is the character you control, who ironically is one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. To me, the plot of Darksiders is simple. It's good, of course, but people tend to overanalyze the lore, and that's not for me. The lore is quite in-depth and interesting, and you can engross yourself in it if you want to, but the synopsis I discussed is enough for context's sake. I'm sorry if you came to this video looking for a lore analysis, but as cool as it can be, the Darksiders games are, well, games, first and foremost. It's my job to explain what makes them work as games. I'd be here all day if I talked about the lore. While I may not be too invested in the lore, I am a huge fan of the character interactions. They make the story more engaging for me, like Samael. You always return to him with items you've retrieved from dungeons, not because you want to make him happy, but because you have to in order to compromise. It's this mentality that makes connecting with War here much easier, and Samael's increasing power truly obnoxious. And then you have Ulthane, who intentionally toys with War and sets up a competition with him to kill as many angels as possible before reaching the next location. War also quarrels with most of the enemies in entertaining ways, but my favorite characters are Vulgrim and the Watcher. Vulgrim, voiced by Phil Lamar, is the merchant that runs the in-game shop where you can upgrade your weapons, learn combos, and more. He's got everything, and I love being welcomed by his silly dialogue every time.
Old Vulgrim's got something new for you.
The Watcher, voiced by Mark Hamill, is like the little voice inside your head. Almost every line this thing spouts is pure gold.
Until this is over, you're a dog on a leash. I say bark, you bark. And if I have to kick you, you'd better not bare your teeth.
His personality, otherworldly appearance, and the way he floats around you and then dissipates all remind me of Midna from Twilight Princess.
Wait, that thing reminds you of me?
Well, yeah, everything about the Watcher's presence makes him the spitting image of you.
So I'm a demon now, am I?
Ugh, you know what? I'd take a floating, demonic Mark Hamill following me around over you any day. Ow! So yeah, Darksiders is very over the top, full of crazy yet enjoyable moments. It's like if a ridiculous metal album became a video game. I am so glad this game doesn't take itself too seriously, and it taps into its comic book sensibilities in the best ways. It's already established itself as a very entertaining game that both looks beautiful and feels good to envelop yourself in, but is it good? Well, let's take a look. To preface, I take issue with a lot of the game's first hour or so. It is riddled with problems, and as a longtime fan of Zelda, it disappoints me to see it falling into so many traps 3D Zelda tends to encounter. Yeah, you heard me right. Darksiders is essentially a 3D Zelda game, and Vigil implemented some of the best elements of other games they hold dear to them. But is this evident from the word go? Absolutely not. The tutorial is a bit shaky for starters. I've seen games handle power trips beautifully for a tutorial level. A couple of years ago I looked at the game based on The Legend of Korra, and that game gave you each element to play around with as soon as you started the game up. Every combo, every upgrade, etc. It felt amazing. It gave you something to look forward to as you played through the game. Darksiders strips your powers away gradually, and eventually you're face to face with a powerful enemy that can literally shake the ground beneath you. That's a good way of handling things, don't get me wrong, but the combat system that you're introduced to isn't exactly fleshed out, because you don't have that many combos at your disposal. Even in The Legend of Korra, you could execute multiple maneuvers with each type of bending in the first seconds of gameplay. I couldn't say I was hyped to play through Darksiders after experiencing this tutorial because I was worried that the game's combat system would be this bare bones the whole time, though you can rest assured it doesn't stay that way. The reason I was concerned is because while Zelda games generally don't flesh out their combat systems, with the obvious exception of Breath of the Wild, the games focus on finding solutions during combat, rather than killing enemies as fast as possible with different combos. I'm all for a combat system that's reminiscent of quintessential action games, but it needs to be present from the moment I jump into the fray, or at least before the first hour is over, that I'll be working towards that. If not, substitute the tutorial with something different and surprise me later down the line. It doesn't help that they continue to bloat the first chunk of game time by adding these unnecessary Shadow Lurker sections. Before the first two dungeons in the game, you have to complete these challenges that introduce you to the game's mechanics. Well, most of the time they do. Sometimes they're just arbitrary, because I can't remember a single instance other than this challenge where I had to protect any allies. Anyway, the Shadow Lurker challenges are pretty boring. Whether it be just slaughtering a set number of enemies or killing enemies with finishers, there's no reason for them to exist. Why can't the game just introduce you to these mechanics organically? Wasn't that what the tutorial was for? I don't feel like I'm improving based on my own ability to adapt to the game. I feel like I'm being forced to improve. Now, that's not bad on its own. I've played my fair share of difficult games that encourage failure as a means to improve. What Darksiders does wrong is presenting these challenges in mundane, ham-fisted ways. This challenge right here is perhaps the worst example. It forces you to be poisoned throughout the fight, whereas in the Twilight Cathedral, the very first dungeon, you are taught how to deal with poison in a more interesting and more challenging way. Dealing with a single, large enemy that can poison you if you make a wrong move is a perfect way of learning how poison works. Why do these Shadow Lurker sections have to exist? I know how to play the game up to the point of the first dungeon, and especially the second dungeon, so why bother with this? These sections are the very definition of padding. They have no value in the game whatsoever. So yeah, the combat system is pretty rough at first. The question is now, how does it improve with time? Well, you see those blue souls that fly out of things like the enemies you kill, the chests you open, and the objects you destroy? Those souls are your currency in this game. This is why I found it so tedious at first to rack up souls, especially when Vulgrim forces you to grab 400 of them. Why? I don't fucking care. It's not a good gameplay element. Just let me use the souls I currently have to fucking pay you, please. Anyway, Vulgrim supplies you with all sorts of different combos for your sword, abilities for combat, and enhancements for your weapons, like gaining more souls from destroying environmental objects, for example. The more combos you buy, the more freedom you have to experiment and see what works best. Ideally, in each combat scenario, you want to kill every enemy as fast as possible, while at the same time maximizing the amount of souls you get from each enemy. Once you're able to continually purchase things from Vulgrim, you will have all the freedom in the world to figure out a pattern for yourself. It's a satisfying feedback loop that I thoroughly enjoy. Combat itself works a bit differently than most action games too. The combos aren't about memorizing button patterns, they're more about tilting the analog stick, holding the square button down, and intentionally delaying your movements for different attacks. These maneuvers can set up massive damage-inflicting combos to mow through enemies. It's this kind of freedom that I always love to see in 3D action games. You also have to get used to dodging in this game, as enemies will punish you if you can't dodge out of their attacks. While this kind of strategy has been present in 3D Zelda for a long time, it's accentuated in the fast-paced combat system of Darksiders. And once you kill enough enemies, your transformation gauge will fill up, allowing you to use War's destructive chaos form. It's self-explanatory, and it's sure as hell fun. Using it at the right moments is crucial though, because unless you buy a refill from Vulgrim, it takes a while to build up again. So it isn't just mindless. There are a few other mechanics that add fuel to the fire too. If you hit circle on a weakened enemy when there's a prompt above your head, you can perform a glory kill. The glory kill system doesn't exactly encourage constant movement and aggression like the Doom reboot did, but it does reward you with more yellow wrath souls, which allows you to activate more special abilities. I find them satisfying to pull off, and they're not terribly disruptive. The only exception goes for the big enemies. The cutscenes are horribly drawn out, and while they are fun to watch once or twice, imagine watching this finisher over and over again. Perhaps the worst offender is the grapple claw. You have to initiate 2 finishers to get the maximum amount of souls from it. What's worse is that if at any point you decide to perform a finisher, their health will reset to a default value, so you have to work it back down to do another finisher. That's why I ended up just brute forcing them at times. The glory kill system in this game is rewarding, but problematic. Speaking of those yellow souls that help you activate special abilities, you're going to need a lot of wrath on the back burner if you want to mow through enemies. All of the special abilities are immensely useful, but costly, like the Blade Geyser, my personal favorite, as well as spells to increase your defensive capabilities. There's even another ability that is reminiscent of a certain THQ game I just looked at. Either way, maintaining wrath takes a lot of micromanagement and dedication. You need to use wrath at just the right moments. You can upgrade both your health and wrath gauges by finding lifestone shards and wrath shards throughout the game world, with 4 shards creating an extra health bar or wrath bar. Obviously, this system is inspired by Zelda's heart pieces, and I have nothing against Darksiders borrowing it. It's been a satisfying system ever since A Link to the Past introduced it. It actively encourages players to seek out ways to increase their strength at all times. No ordinary person on their first run wants to remain with such a small amount of health the whole time, and wrath abilities are costly, so you need these things. Vulgrim also sells a few wrath shards if you feel like using some souls on them. This gives the world of Darksiders purpose. In addition, you can find several artifacts hidden throughout the world that, when sold to Vulgrim, give you a different amount of souls depending on the variant you sell. One of them will even give you a full Wrath Core and 5,000 souls. There's a finite amount of them, just like the shards. They're perhaps the most useful collectibles, as souls are your bread and butter in this game. But in order for finding these things to be rewarding, the world structure needs to accommodate for them. It needs to puzzle you, test you, challenge your knowledge. and I felt that Darksiders most of the time doesn't do this in its overworld. A lot of the time, shards and artifacts can be found just barely off the beaten path. It happens far too often where I'll be on my way to my next objective, or I'll be looking for Vulgrim, and I notice a small area in which I can also travel through. Lo and behold, there's a chest there. Rarely do I find myself challenged. Occasionally they will implement the odd puzzle that makes opening up a chest more satisfying, but most of the time they bank on the act of finding the chest being fun. And I understand that sentiment. I did enjoy finding chests overall. Parts of the world are brimming with chests like the Ashlands, but never did I feel excited about finding something in the world like I do in Zelda. Here's what I think. I mentioned before that the world of Darksiders has purpose due to the amount of things you can find in it. The nature in which you find these items, though, is mostly bland. Let's go back to Zelda. In the past, I've mentioned how Twilight Princess has an exhausting overworld that feels like it's been spread too thin. But at least you can apply what you've learned in challenges. That's what makes exploring feel much more rewarding in Zelda a lot of the time. Take a look at this example. During the Snow Peak ruins, you acquire the ball and chain and encounter ice block puzzles. Once you've learned about how they work, you can find a cave that leads to an even harder block puzzle. You get to apply your knowledge in order to nab another heart piece. This is one of a plethora of examples across the entire Zelda series. The equivalent in Darksiders seems to be going to another area with a new item, using the item in question, and grabbing your reward. That's it. This is actually how you grab the champion artifact too. The one that gives you the full Wrath Core. Pretty disappointing that it was that easy to find. Granted, Zelda is of course victim to this trope too. I'm not giving it a pass because it's Zelda. My point here is I feel like Darksiders mistook this trope for a good design element. Of all the things Darksiders refines as a so-called Zelda clone, it also implements things that really should have been left in the dust. Like traveling to places on foot a lot of the time. If you're going to do this, please make the world condensed enough so that it isn't a problem like in Majora's Mask. It seems like everywhere you look in Termina, there's somewhere to go, with the 4 dungeons and quests throughout the world to take on. Yes, getting a horse speeds the process up here, but it doesn't feel like nearly as much of a chore to travel as it does in Ocarina of Time for a good chunk of the game. Or the beginning of Twilight Princess, for example. War's Dash does a good job of getting you places, but the amount of time you spend trekking your way through places you've already been is obnoxious. And even when you get your horse, you can only use it in areas that are large enough to accommodate for it. Thank God for those serpent holes. They at least alleviate some of the travel time, but instead of just loading you into the next area, you have to travel through yourself. The next area only appears as fast as you can travel. They do hide a few chests throughout specific serpent holes, but most of the time I'm just wishing it would give me a loading screen. And even if you were to say, oh, but Darksiders is action-oriented, it doesn't need a strong world, I would call bullshit, because there's an entire endgame quest devoted to exploring the overworld and collecting things. If you think I'm just gonna make a beeline for the Armageddon Blade pieces, you'd be dead wrong. That would be painstakingly boring. Of course I'll want to look for everything else to keep things fresh, but that's just it. I'm mindlessly looking for items in an overworld. We'll talk more about the endgame quest later on because it ties into this game's 100% completion structure. For now, I'll just say this. The world of Darksiders, while important, doesn't challenge you in a way that Zelda does. And for some people, maybe that's enough. I did enjoy getting stuff in the world, but not nearly as much as I could have. Now, let's talk about another huge cornerstone of any Zelda game. Dungeons. Following a challenge in the overworld like a random on-rails shooting segment that has no place being in the game, or a friendly competition with Ulthane, you'll find yourself entering a dungeon. Darksiders sure does have some dungeons. And for me, they're the highlight of the game. The game's key developers have gone on to say that once they completed the Twilight Cathedral, they knew what Darksiders was going to be. For an introduction to dungeons as a concept in this game, they sure did create a captivating one. It's got the right amount of combat and the right amount of exploration and puzzles. The new enemies introduced in this dungeon attempt to test your ability to dodge and counter effectively, which I like. They also introduced the crossblade here, which is better than the boomerang from Zelda in every way, because it is a legitimately viable weapon that cuts the shit out of things from far away. Other than that, it's a nice introduction to the mechanics of puzzles in dungeons. Using the sticky bombs and the crossblade in tandem is key here, and that can be said for the final boss as well. The Tiamat fight is so cool. It's not the hardest boss fight in the world, and she doesn't shake things up much, but I love the setting for the fight and her size is pretty intimidating. That'll be a recurring theme with the bosses in this game. Also, the Twilight Cathedral is perhaps the first location in the game to use the climbing mechanics effectively. One of the games Vigil took inspiration from was undisputably Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. That game's climbing mechanics created an organic way of solving each room, rather than bloating the game with pointless climbing sections like Uncharted loves to do. Darksiders occasionally has its moments in the overworld where figuring out a climbing challenge can reward you, but for the most part it's used as a means to get from one place to the other mindlessly. In the Twilight Cathedral, however, enemies can swarm you while trying to cross a pit of lava below, for example. The overall percentage of Darksiders that has climbing is rather minuscule, and it's about as effective as when Zelda uses it. But sometimes I get flashbacks to the ingenious climbing and parkour of the Sands of Time. And as a game that echoes acclaimed titles of the past, I think Darksiders does its job in that regard. The next dungeon is the Griever's Lair, and it has an interesting theme. The Griever will constantly follow you throughout the dungeon and disrupt your progress, because to be fair, you're the one invading its home. This dungeon plays with the concept of the crossblade a lot more, and creates a lengthy and interesting puzzle. You have to transfer fire from one steam pipe to the other so you can ignite the bomb clinging to the crystal. It's a great idea, and thanks to the introduction of the Tremor Gauntlet, the Griever's Lair is chock full of great puzzles and exploration that revolve around what you've learned. The final fight with the Griever may be piss easy, but I still had a great time. They even have you swim through a maze in this dungeon, and kudos to them for making swimming feel good in this game. You're fast, you have mobility, and you can hack away at anything that wants to disrupt you. Following this is the Ashlands. I don't know if I'd call it a dungeon per se, but it is one of the big locales in the world, and the way you progress makes it feel like one. The puzzles here focus on slowing down time at just the right moments in order to climb safely through the fortresses. Because this area is so open-ended, it focuses less on intricate puzzles and more on exploration for chests and combat. They even throw in a bomb launcher to break up the pace, and it's fun to use once you know how to shoot enemies efficiently. It's because of this, and the fact that you get your horse back here after a rather tough, dodge-heavy battle, that makes the Ashlands one of my overall favorite areas in the game. It has the most to do in it, and it's especially fun to traverse on horseback after you kill the Stygian. The Stygian will follow you through on your first run in order to protect its territory. If you're in the sand for too long, it'll devour you, and they set up some interesting challenges with it. The final fight with it isn't anything special though, and it bugged out. Twice. It wouldn't take damage, and I wasted my precious time shooting at it for no reason. Apparently the Stygian's bugs don't stop there, and I guess even in the remaster it still hasn't been fixed. Great. Either way though, I love the Ashlands. It has some of my favorite moments in the game, like the way War kills the Stygian. Pretty fucking brutal. Oh, I also love the way War kicks his enemy's sword over to him here. That says something about his character. He would rather finish his enemy off in an even match than have an advantage over them. He craves combat, but he wants it to be honorable. And we also got that beautiful line from the Watcher.
Are you not entertained?
As much as I like the Ashlands, my favorite dungeons are without a doubt the Iron Canopy and the Black Throne. The Iron Canopy made for an awesome fusion of the mechanics you learn throughout the game, as well as some challenging fights with some rather large enemies. The Black Throne, however, beats it out. Why? It has the Voidwalker. The Voidwalker is the portal gun, with the only difference being you can charge portals up in order to launch yourself out of them. Of all the things Darksiders borrows, this was the last thing I expected to see. And it's totally fine that it's in the game, because these puzzles are easily the best out of Darksiders' total playtime. There's a running theme of figuring out how to get the laser to travel into the next area, but where it all culminates is this puzzle right here. You have to figure out a way to travel up to the top using only these 3 lifts and 2 weights. What then follows is a series of portals so that you can maneuver the weights around each lift to work your way up. It's genius. It's one of the few moments in this game where I was completely blown away. On top of that, the Black Throne also provides you with some of the most challenging fights in the entire game, testing you on your ability to use the right combos, use Wrath efficiently, and dodge as best you can. It does have its problems though. They use far too many enemy gauntlets throughout the dungeon that don't change very frequently, and it just comes off as frustrating. On top of that, you have to go up against this boss 3 times. It's not that exciting once you figure out you use your portals to shoot yourself up on top of it, and there isn't any reason you should fight it 3 times. You guys like padding? I sure do. To make up for that, the fight with Straga is pretty fun. On top of having to deal with enemies, you need to dodge his giant hammer. Once you have the opportunity, you shoot a portal on his hammer and climb up on his back to deal
massive damage, mate.
Once you settle the score with Straga, Azrael saves War and they escape the tower. While inside, he informed War of his and Abaddon's conspiracy to bring about the apocalypse early. But since Abaddon was killed, he decided to set things right by assisting War in defeating the Destroyer. Before you can go up against the Destroyer, you have to acquire the Mask of Shadows and reforge the Armageddon Blade. This results in a showdown with your own shadow. Sound familiar? Well, to be fair, good ideas can be recycled as long as they're repurposed well enough. and this fight is a testament to that. There's nothing quite like countering the moves that you use yourself. I feel like this is something I'll never get tired of in games. After that, you can reforge the blade. This is the endgame quest I was talking about. It gives you the opportunity to collect things in the overworld you may have missed along the way, kind of like the Triforce chart quest in Wind Waker, or the search for the Chozo artifacts in Metroid Prime. Walking around and looking for things while you build the blade is serviceable, as I previously brought up. But in this phase of the game, you're encouraged to collect as much as you can in the time you're given, as you're revisiting pretty much every area in the game. So now would be a good time to go for 100% completion if you're up for it, right? Well, for the most part, getting 100% in Darksiders is rewarding. But by the time you're at this point, what are you going to put all of your health and wrath towards? All that's left in the world is the final boss. Going back to Wind Waker, there are still a lot of islands to explore and various different quests for you to complete around the Great Sea. Metroid Prime allows you to grab as many Chozo artifacts as possible with the arsenal you have at your disposal, as long as you activate the quest by stumbling upon the temple. Darksiders has nothing going on after you complete the main quest other than finding these items, which, as I've stated, doesn't challenge your resourcefulness that much. It's fine, and it is fun to level up war, but rarely did I find myself solving puzzles to get there, or completing enemy gauntlets. Here's another issue too. If you just want every lifestone shard, the game forces you to grab every single artifact. You have to make sure you check every nook and cranny for these fucking things. It's not fun. The other thing you could go for is the Abyssal Armor set, but I wouldn't recommend it. Even if the pieces are a lot more enjoyable to seek out due to their rarity, by the time you obtain all these pieces, you'll be at the final boss anyway. You could use spells to enhance your defense too, it seems pointless. And it's not like the final boss is that difficult. Just learn how to dodge effectively and you'll be fine. Ah, right. I guess that's all that's left. As it turns out, Abaddon chose to rule in Hell when faced by the Council, becoming the Destroyer. His fight, as I just said, isn't that hard after everything you worked for in the game, but it does test your knowledge and abilities in combat like no other fight. It serves its purpose as a final boss, more so the second phase at least. It doesn't take much effort to knock him down in the first phase when you're jousting with him. I also really love the way Darksiders ends. The Watcher attempts to break free and fuck everyone over, but not only does Uriel break the 7th seal, she swore an oath to kill War during an earlier confrontation. She keeps her oath and kills him, but the seal being broken restored War to full power, resulting in this beautiful moment, and...
You will be hunted. The White City for certain. The Council, and there will be others. You would wage this war alone?
No. Not alone.
Summoning the rest of the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. This was an excellent way to end the game and hype me up for what would become a series. So, that's Darksiders. Does it create its own identity based on the games it blends together? Sometimes. I think the strongest unique aspects are the art direction and the writing. But throughout the game I kept telling myself, hey, this is like Zelda. Hey, this is like Prince of Persia. Hey, this is like God of War. Hey, this is like insert game here. I don't want to discourage anyone from playing Darksiders that hasn't already though. It's a great game. While it has serious issues in its first hour or so with its combat and monotonous tutorials, as well as its less than fulfilling overworld and its take on 100% completion, the amount of unadulterated fun that comes from its satisfying mechanics and the intelligently designed dungeons and puzzles makes for an awesome time. I think that's where Darksiders shines the most. It's fun. And as Reggie famously once said,
if it's not fun, why bother?
As we know now, Darksiders did eventually become a series as Vigil was hoping it would. They would be able to improve on Darksiders and give it more of its own identity. 2.5 years later, we got Darksiders 2. I'll see you all next time when we meet death.